sections were easier to go through. Some sections they felt were a bit challenging. African poetry pulled us through today because we had 3 poems from the African continent. Prayer to the Mass, At a Funeral, and This Winter Coming. And then we had the Solitude coming in as well. Let's go and see what was expected of us. The essay poem was based on Prayer to the Mass by Leopold Senghor. So we are going to try and see exactly what we were expected to do. It says, in Prayer to the Mass, the speaker shows that despite hardships, okay, we underline our keywords. The African people, definitely we will underline, will persevere. We are there as well, so that we can be able to know what is expected of us. We will underline, will persevere, right? Will persevere and create new prosperity with close reference to diction, imagery, and tone. Critically discuss the validity of the statement. So when we are coming in, we are supposed to focus on the diction that shows the perseverance and the opportunities that the Black African people created to become prosperous and free, despite the hardships that they went through. Diction, imagery, and tone. All right, let's go and see what we could have used for this essay. All right, we are going to categorize and see what we do. We are going to put the first column that becomes our diction. We're going to put the second column that becomes our, my apologies, that becomes, oh my gosh, my apologies. It will become our imagery. So that will be the second thing that we do when it comes to this poem. Right. Imagery. Oh my word. What have I just done? We have our imagery as well that will come through for us in the second line. And then we also have our tone. So those are the 3, 1, 2, and 3. So we bring our imagery here, and then we bring our tone. So those are the 3 categories that we're going to focus on and see what we bring as necessary to be discussed under diction, imagery, and tone. Under our diction, despotism must not be left out. If we go to our poem, despotism is in line 10. Now, while the Africa of despotism is dying, we are going to take that word without fail. Pitiable Princess is coming out. I'm seeing it in that same line as well. We can also talk about tone can also come in. We can also talk about machines. I believe we have the machines. Where are they? Where are the machines? Machines, cannons, died of machines and cannons. Those we can also discuss. So when we're coming in, what do we mean? We discuss these terms when touching on despotism. Right, let's bring in our despotism there. We quote it. So when discussing despotism, the word clearly shows that the extent of the colonialism. We are talking about dictatorship. of the colonial countries, colonial Western countries. We are also going to talk about pitiable princess, as we said. When we're talking of pitiable princess, we can mention the state Africa is left in, after being stripped of everything. So those are some of the things that we can bring in. Those are the hardships that we go through. So we are now talking about Africa being left empty. Left empty. Poor. And in a pitiful state. That shows the hardships that we go through. And then we're also going to talk about the machines, where we talk about introduction of industrialization has taken away the state of the country, where the world is left dead. We are here, the world that has died. Machines is industrialization. And then cannons is wars that have left Africa in a dire state. Right. So those are the things that we can include when coming in. Imagery, we can talk about, let's go and see. Where we're talking about, you got this place, you purify the air, mass of maskless faces free from dimples and wrinkles. We have composed this image. This is my face that bends over the altar of white paper. Right. Altar of white paper can come in, whereby we are talking about the new legislations that can come in. That's line 8 to line 8. So in line 8, we are talking about new legislations that can help the new Africa to rise again. We are also going to talk about the rhetorical questions that come in with the tone hope, despite the pain of the Africans. There is still an element of hope. And then we are going to talk about, they call us, but we are men of the dance. We can bring that in as well. Whose feet only gain power when they beat the hard soil. This is where we're talking about the cultural pride. The cultural pride gives them a reason to celebrate their identity. So these also come in and show us exactly what we need. I'm going to add on to diction, because as I'm doing the men of dance, I'm seeing coffee heads, coffee men, oily men, cotton heads. These are the hardships that we connecting this to diction. These are the hardships that they also went through that show identity was through their slave trade. Identity was of their trade. So they were only known and identified because of the trade that they did. That can also come in under diction for the first part. So these are some of the things that we can talk about. We also have arouses the dead and in a new dawn, and the wise in a new dawn. So that can also come in as a part of the imagery. We can also go to the imagery of the last garment. It can also come in as a part of figures of speech, whereby it says, and who sacrificed their lives like the poor man, his last garment, where we talk about the issue of the sacrifice. This is the sign of sacrifice. Last garment shows the sacrifice. Shows the sacrifice. Of the young people. So that's what we can bring in as well, to bring a change. To bring change. So these are the things that come in and are part of the imagery. Let's go to tone. We are talking about a tone of desperation, a plea made to the ancestors, plea made to ancestors. I believe this is in line, listen to me, line 9. In the name of your image, listen to me. This is a plea that is made in line 9 to the ancestors to save them. I believe we can also talk about the tone of pride as well. Men of the dance, as we talked about it, whereby they're talking about the rhythm that they are in with the land. That's the last two lines of the poem that give us a tone of pride about regaining their cultural pride and inheritance. Cultural pride, inheritance, gained again. Right. That's some of the things that could have been disguised. It's 10 marks, but I think we have enough that can sustain you for those, for the 250 to 300 words. Let's go to question number 2. At a Funeral by Dennis Brutus was a contextual question. The Valencia Majombozi, a poem, and I believe we've seen this question so many times in our booklets, especially 2.1 and 2.2 and 2.3. They've been dominating. I believe this must have been the most popular poem, as we have seen this question so many times. Let's go to the first one. Explain the word pageantry in line 1 in the context of the poem. Black, green, and gold at sunset pageantry. Pageantry refers to a display. Ceremonial display is what we touch on here. It's a ceremonial display. It was 2 marks. So we must be able to give a full context answer. So the funeral is just for show, and it does not have any meaning without any meaning. So that's what we expect to be discussed about pageantry. Explain the effect of the punctuation mark in salute. It has an exclamation mark, and therefore they want the function of the exclamation mark. It is to bring in a command. Bring in a command, which is a call for people. to honor the dead, the deceased. So it is a command and instruction, and therefore we had to be clear on what it does. It urges people to take action, salute the dead, honor and respect the dead. Refer to line 10, not death, but death's head tyranny. It says, skies our ground. Identify the figure of speech used in the line. We definitely have a metaphor there. That's a metaphor. 1 mark was clean because they split the figure of speech and the effectiveness. And then the effectiveness is the T2.32, whereby we have to be clear. The apartheid, comment on the effectiveness of this image. The apartheid rule is compared to a death's head. This is a skull, remember? As we always talked about the Nazis when coming to this line. So when we are saying the harshness, we are referring to the harshness, the tyranny, the cruelty, any of those was applicable, the cruelty of the apartheid government is what is referred to. The cruelty of the apartheid government is what we refer to, and is compared to the Grim Reaper, which is during the Nazi times. So became worse, as in the Nazis. Refer to line 12, better that we should die than we should lie down, and critically discuss the effectiveness of this line as a conclusion to the poem. It is a commitment, a declaration. It's a declaration made that death is better than submitting to the apartheid laws, to the tyranny of the oppressive government. It was a 3-mark question, which is makes it reflective of the, based on reflection of the unexpected early death of the young generation, represented by Valencia, of the young generation. Therefore, it is a call that they will rebel. Rebellion is called for. Uprising to fight against the oppression. It's a sacrifice that they are willing to make. So that's what we talk about when we say better that we should lie down. They would rather sacrifice themselves to die in fighting against the oppression than to give in and submit to the oppressive rule. This Winter Coming was by Karen Press, the third poem of the day. Explain the mood that is created by the phrase solemn churning in broken waves in line 4. When we come to line 4, we are in the second paragraph. The sea is solemn, churning in broken waves, and around the rocks the sand is sinking away. Okay. What is the mood created in the context of the poem? We are having violence of the waves. Violence of the waves creates a gloomy mood. Frightening as the violence that is to come. Right, it was 2 marks, so we had to give 2 points in answer. Explain why the line "who is not frightened" is repeated throughout the poem. Remember, we called it an anaphora. So if it's an anaphora, it is to emphasize. The anaphora emphasizes the universal fear. Everyone must be frightened. It enforces the helpless state of the people of South Africa. All right. Refer to line 14. The sky is tolling like a black bell. Identify the figure of speech used in this line. It is a metaphor. It's a simile. Like a black bell. Like a black bell. It's a simile. Comment on the effectiveness on this image. The sky is compared to a black bell. We start there always. The sky is compared to a black bell. To a black bell. And then we continue and say the funeral bell emphasizes the deaths that will come. And it's the foreshadowing. Right. Refer to lines 28 to 31. It says, and the sky collapsing under centuries of rain, the wind like a mountain crying. Who is not frightened of this winter coming upon us now? Critically discuss how these lines convey the central message of the poem. This is the message of the poem is the approaching violence due to the state of emergency imposed, which will bring more violence, deaths, but there is an arising of protests and resistance to fight the oppressive regime. There's our 3 marks. Right, we move on to question 4, solitude. Explain how the first 2 lines offer a comment on the fickle nature of people. Laugh and the world laughs with you, and weep and you weep alone. We have a contrast of the 2 images there, and happiness of a comment. Happiness is achieved because it attracts happy people, but in line 2, sadness is experienced alone. Humans support each other during happy times, but in times of sadness, a person will be alone. Humans desert each other in times of sadness, but humans support each other during the happy times. Explain the effect of the word sigh in the context of the stanza. Right. When we're talking of sigh, that is onomatopoeia as well. The sadness is lost in the air. This is onomatopoeia. This is definitely onomatopoeia. Which shows sad times are not shared. Refer to lines 3 to 4. For the said old earth must borrow its mirth, but has trouble enough on its own. Identify the figure of speech used. It is personification. And then we have to comment on the effectiveness, whereby we are talking about earth is described and said and old, given qualities. Earth, given qualities of being said and old. Of being said and old. That's personification. And what does it do? Earth needs to draw happiness from somewhere. It does not. Earth does not have happiness itself. It must draw it from somewhere else. It must draw it from somewhere else. And then I'll refer to lines 23 to 24. But one by one, we must all file on through the narrow aisles of pain. Critically discuss how these lines convey the central message of the poem. We are alone in our journey, in our life journey. Humans go through their life journey alone. Shown by the word narrow. As it can only accommodate one person, and therefore we face death alone. Loneliness or a state of solitude is experienced in a solitary state. Right, let's go to the unseen poem, which is question number 5. Question number 5 says, The Master of the House by Oswald Njali, South African poem as well. Master, I am a stranger to you, but will you hear my confession? I am a faceless man who lives in the backyard of your house. I share your table so heavily heaped with bread, meat and fruit. It huffs like a horse drawing a coal cart. As the rich man's to Lazarus, the crumbs were swept to my lap by my Lizzie. Sweetie, eat and be satisfied now. Tomorrow we shall be gone. So nightly I ride the gauntlet, wrestle with your mastiff. Caesar for the bone pregnant with meat, and wash it down with Kitty's milk. I am the nocturnal animal that steals through the fence lair to meet my mate and flees at the break of dawn before the hunter and the hounds run me to ground. Explain the word faceless, line 3, in the context of the poem. All right. Let's go back to line 3. Line 3 said, I am a faceless man who lives in the backyard of your house. Unknown. It's unknown. Unknown is acceptable. We can also accept no identity also comes in. No identity. Unrecognizable is also acceptable. Unrecognizable. Explain the effect of the irony inherent in the speaker's use of master in the title. The title said the master of the house. Then our question said, explain the effect of the irony inherent in the speaker's use of master in the title. Okay. We are talking about the faceless man is not even known to him. The owner does not even know what's happening in his own house. But on the other hand, the faceless man seems to know more about the master. So the master is oblivious of what is happening in his own yard. In his own yard. But the faceless man seems to know more. Refer to lines 11 to 13. As the rich man's to Lazarus, the crumbs were set to my lap by my Lizzie. Identify the figure of speech used in these lines. Simile. As the rich man's to Lazarus, that's a simile. And then comment on how this image reflects the speaker's attitude. The speaker seems to be aware though he feels like a Lazarus, a beggar. He feels like a beggar. He is aware, though he feels like a beggar. He also is, he realizes the unfairness of the situation. Refer to lines 20 to 25. I am the nocturnal animal. Run me to the ground. Critically discuss how the diction in these lines contributes to the central idea of the poem. Your response should include 2 examples of diction. We are talking about inequality, social inequality. That's what we are referring to. Social inequality that is dominating, and therefore due to the apartheid system. And now when we're coming in, we are talking about restrictions due to movements, that bring also hardships and poverty, less poverty. But they said we must use 2 diction words. I think I saw hunter. Before the hunter and the hounds run me to the ground. I'm going to take hunter. Brutality of being chased. I think I also saw fenced lay there in those lines. Yes, there is fenced lay. It steals through my fenced lay. Captivity, restriction, restrictions as well. There's also animal, whereby we refer to being dehumanized, also comes in. All right, any 2 were appropriate for you to substantiate the central message. The picture of Dorian Gray. In the picture of Dorian Gray, the values of the main characters and the Victorian aristocracy are superficial and hypocritical. This is a past exam paper question. We have seen this in the past exam paper. Values of the main characters, Victorian aristocracy. We need to pin down our characters so that we know who we are touching on. I'm going to touch with Lord Henry. We are going to just discuss and list the people that are relevant. I believe Lord Henry is going to start. Oh, my apologies. Lord Henry is going to start the discussions because he's the first one that we see displaying the evidence of hypocrisy. So we are going to start with Lord Henry first. When coming to Lord Henry, we're going to look at his influence. We are going to talk about his influence on innocent Dorian. Right. We are going to talk about his carelessness, yet he does not live that life up to those philosophies, but he impresses them on the young and naive Dorian Gray. So Lord Henry starts off and shows us disregard for other characters, and as such he sees nothing wrong in plotting Dorian to be an experiment. He is ignorant of the consequences that can happen. That's Lord Henry for us. Hypocrisy, he speaks against marriage, but he is married himself. He encourages Dorian to marry later on, yet he speaks ill of it, yet he is married as well. Those are the things that come into Lord Henry. He encourages Dorian to embrace the superficial beauty which is in the portrait, leading him to make the first end bargain. That's Lord Henry for us. He definitely comes in. I think the other person that we need to talk about is Dorian himself. I'm also seeing Dorian living up to that expectation as well. When coming to Dorian Gray, I believe we're going to talk about the double life that he lives. Double life, lives up to a beautiful life in society, yet he is internally corrupt and ugly as shown by the portrait. He shows his face in society, his beautiful young face in society, and goes to the dinners and the parties, yet he hides the portrait in the upper room. I believe also we can talk about Dorian and influence, living up to the expectations of immorality. His behavior is questionable as he corrupts Lord Kent's son, the Adrian Singleton's reputation is ruined for those young men because of the association with Dorian Gray. And as such, that's where we talk about the hypocrisy of Dorian Gray, that he is raised amidst the scandal of his mother's affair with a stableman, but he is now amidst the scandals in society about how he corrupts the Lord Kent's sons, the Adrian Singletons, and the Ellen Campbells. Also, we're going to talk about his life of hedonism. When we talk about his life of hedonism, he still looks innocent, but he's hedonistic. He's a murderer, as he murders Basil and pretends when the rumors about Basil's disappearance arise and quest, he pretends he doesn't know anything, yet he destroyed any evidence of Basil being murdered in his childhood schoolroom. His portrait bears the burden of his immoral behavior. That's why he locks it away. And what does it do? He still remains blemish-free and careless in his corruption. The other thing is the Ellen Campbell is hypocritical there. He blackmails Ellen Campbell to dispose of Basil's body. He even uses fake tears to persuade Basil. So these are the things that we're talking about, the opium dens that they frequent, and we see the degradation, physical degradation that is shown in that society. Moral corruption of society is seen through the state of the people that I described. The lady is described as haggard and old. Adrian Singleton is described as wrinkled. So those are the things that we are talking about when it comes to this essay, amongst others that could have been described. All right, let's go to the context questions. On the context questions, we have extract A. We will have to go through them so that we can get the context. It's from chapter 2. Oh, it was only the other way. If the picture could change and I could be always what I am now, why did you paint it? It will mock me someday, mock me horrible. The hot tears welled into his eyes. He tore his hand away, and flinging himself on the divan, he buried his face in the cushions as if he was praying. This is your doing, Harry, said the painter bitterly. Lord Henry shrugged his shoulders. It is the real Dorian Gray, that is all. It is not. If it is not, what have I to do with it? You should have gone away when I asked you, he muttered. I stayed when you asked me, was Lord Henry's answer. Harry, I can't quarrel with my two best friends at once, but between you both, you have made me hate the finest piece of work I have ever done, and I will destroy it. What is it but canvas and color? I will not let it come across our three lives and mar them. Dorian Gray lifted his golden head from the pillow and with pallid face and tear-stained eyes, looked at him as he walked over to the dead deal painting table that was set beneath the high curtained window. What was it doing there? His fingers were straying about among the litter of tint tubes and dry brushes, seeking for something. Yes, it was the long palette knife with its thin blade of lead steel. He had found it at last. He was going to rip up the canvas. With a stifled sob, he leaped from the couch and, rushing over to Hallward, tore the knife out of his hand and flung it to the end of the studio. "Don't, Basil, don't," he cried. "It will be murder." Place this extract in context. We expect these questions. I believe we've been preparing learners for them all halfway through the year to say you must be able to get those 3 marks without fail. Basil has just completed a portrait of Dorian. That's the extract that is coming from. Henry has Basil has just finished the final details of the portrait and is ready to show Dorian and Lord Henry. Dorian is already from the garden scene with Lord Henry and therefore has been influenced by the philosophies that Lord Henry has exposed him to. You have to place the extract in context. 3 points, as I have mentioned 3 as well. So please, let's make sure that we give them the 3 events that lead to the extract happening. Refer to lines 2. It will mock me someday. In what way does the statement act as a foreshadowing? The portrait becomes a mirror of what Dorian has become. So the portrait will always be there to show him what he has developed into or become. The ugliness of the picture and the horror of his sins will always be looking back at him. And I believe we are talking about, indeed, it does mock him later on as it changes every time he commits a sin. Had a line of cruelty after Sybil's death, has drops of blood from the hand after the death of Basil. So it is a foreshadowing that mocks him every time he comes back from committing a sin or an act of corruption, and therefore it looks at him back and mocks him every time. Refer to line 6. It is the real Dorian Gray that is all. Use this line as a starting point to discuss Henry's attitude towards Dorian. When we are coming to Henry's attitude, we must be very clear. Manipulation. Henry is manipulative. So we are going to bring manipulation here. It's manipulative. That is all. He's very manipulative. When we're talking about manipulation, he manipulates Dorian to believe that youth and beauty are more important than anything else. He's very cynical. He is also dismissive of Dorian and the state of his innocence and lack of knowledge at that time. So I will put dismissive as well, because he dismisses Dorian's age, naivety. He also ignores Dorian's innocence. Refer to line 23. It will be murder. Discuss the irony of Dorian's words in relation to the novel's end. He stabs the portrait at the end himself. So now when we're coming in, this is the recognition at the end of the connection between his soul and the portrait, that they are connected. When he does the Faustian bargain, he exchanges souls with the portrait, and therefore what happens is when he destroys the painting to get rid of the curse and the ugly thing, he ends his own life. So he fails to recognize that when he stabs the painting, that he is stabbing his own soul. So when he says murder, he murders himself, because when he stabs the portrait, he's stabbing himself at the end. That's the irony. Forgetting or being ignorant of the connection and the link between the soul, his soul, and the portrait. Our second extract was from chapter 15 of the novel, and it says, that evening at 8:30, exquisitely dressed and wearing a large buttonhole of Parma violets, Dorian Gray was ushered into Lady Nabarro's drawing room by bowing servants. His forehead was throbbing with maddened nerves, and he felt widely excited, but his manner as he bent over his hostess's hand was as easy and graceful as ever. Perhaps one never seems so much at one's ease as when one has to play a part. Certainly, no one looking at Dorian Gray that night would have believed that he had passed through a tragedy as horrible as any tragedy of our age. Those finely shaped fingers could never have clutched a knife for sin, nor those smiling lips have cried out on God and goodness. He himself could not help wondering at the calm of his demeanor, and for a moment he felt keenly the terrible pleasure of a double life. Refer to lines 1 to 3. That evening at 8:30, it says that evening at 8:30, exquisitely dressed and wearing a large buttonhole of Parma violets, Dorian Gray was ushered into Lady Nabarro's drawing room by bowing servants. How do these lines highlight the class divide in Victorian times? I believe we're going to touch on expensiveness of the dress. That's one of the things that we must talk about. Quality, exquisiteness, exquisitely dressed. So we're going to talk about the quality of clothing. That's what's coming in there. That shows Dorian Gray's expensive taste. And I believe we are looking at the contrast that is made by bowing servants. Bowing servants, which shows the working class society, that gives respect to the elite, who is Dorian Gray at that time in Lady Nabarro. Relate any incident from the novel that further illustrates this class divide. Later on in the from the novel, any other incident from the novel, we are going to touch on the Vanes, Sybil Vane's description of their home. Vane's description of their home. That's something that we cannot leave out. We are also going to talk about Dorian Gray sending for Mr. Hubbard, who had to sending for Mr. Hubbard to come to his house and frame the portrait. So those are the things that we can bring in there. 7.6 says Dorian thinks about appearing at the dinner without letting on that he has met that a man is playing a part. Discuss other evidence in the novel to suggest that Dorian blurs the lines between reality and art. When we come into reality and art, we are going to talk about failing to distinguish between Sybil as an actress and as a person. So those are the things that we can bring in. Sybil, the character, and Sybil, the person. He fails to separate the two because he falls in love with the acting characters of Sybil on stage. And I believe we're also going to talk about after the death of Sybil, he asked Basil to do a portrait of that. That's also something else. After the murder of Basil, his detachment and calls Basil's corpse a thing as if he did not exist. So those are the things that we're talking about. failing to separate himself from the portrait. He is so consumed with his beauty that he cannot separate what he has become as he sees it in the portrait. Consider line 8. Those finely shaped fingers could never have clutched a knife for sin. Using this line as a starting point, explain how the aesthetic values of the Victorian society cloud their beliefs. Aestheticism, physical beauty. So somehow anyone who's seen as beautiful is taken as being good and innocent and worthy. So that's why it's difficult for the rumors to be believed when he is being accused of being corrupt. So those are the things that we mean and say aesthetic values of Victorian aristocracy cloud their beliefs. Beautiful things are acceptable and valued. So that's why now there is a connection between physical beauty and its importance and priority in society. That's why also Basil wants Dorian to confirm that the rumors are false when he confronts him about what he has heard in the streets. And then it says, referred to lines 10 to 11, terrible pleasure of double life. Critically assess the statement with regard to Dorian's moral decay. One of the things that happen is that duplicity in Dorian is seen through Dorian embracing hedonism and disregarding morality. Appearance to Dorian is more important, and that's why he wants to maintain the beauty as he sees it in the portrait. And therefore, what does he do? He hides his corruption from the public. So when we say he's living a double life, we're talking about the innocent and beautiful Dorian presenting himself to society on a daily basis, but the corrupt Dorian is hid from the public and locked in the schoolroom. Also, we are going to talk about disregard for justice. He allows himself to forget and not consider the consequences of all his actions, and that's why it is recorded in the portrait, in the painting, and therefore he does not make it part of his daily life and his responsibility. So he disguises himself when he goes to the opium dens and changes clothes to fit in with the poor crowd there so that he cannot be recognized. So he's able to forget his conscience and his guilt when he's there, but though it haunts him, he still ignores it. So those are some of the things that we could have taken when it comes to the duality of their lives or the double life. Okay, we got to the easy question of life of Pi. Pi Patel's survival instincts and ability to adapt to his environment play a crucial role in his survival at sea. Critically discuss the validity of the above statement. As usual, you should do an essay of 400 to 450 words. I'm just going to discuss possibilities of life of Pi. Oh, that novel is very long. Hey, to those who are doing it, I pray you finished it and you have adapted to the sections. I believe the first thing we're going to talk about is Pi's ability to think quickly. That is something that becomes important for his survival. He is a very resilient young man, and I believe the shock of the shipwreck and being the only survivor of his family, he quickly uses his instinct to swim to the lifeboat. And the second instinct, I believe, is to save Richard Parker. Despite the despairing situation he is in, he still makes the right decisions. Keeping himself alive on the boat is what now dominates his life in the boat, and as a result, it becomes a priority more than him being stranded on sea. Basic needs that he has to attend to: fresh water, food, which is the fish, securing shelter. That's where we realize that he is able to attend to what is necessary despite him being stranded and being alone and being so young. Improvising solutions allows him to adapt to his environment. He even designs tools for survival when he's there, and also by using his knowledge from the survival manual when he was a young boy at the sea and their father was grooming them, he's able to create a safeness for himself from the animals on the lifeboat. And therefore later on, he now commands himself to become the dominant in the training of Richard Parker. So he swaps roles with Richard Parker. He is a prey to Richard Parker, but now he switches roles and he becomes the dominant one in the boat. Also, adapting to coexist with the tiger helps him to survive. Territory is drawn and respect mutually comes on with Richard Parker in the boat, and there is amicability there. He uses Richard Parker and his presence to stay focused and alive and alert, both mentally and physically. I believe he uses his alter ego of Richard Parker to cope on how to dealing with the horrors of that experience that he is in. Hope is part of his main survival mode. His faith, religions, the three religions, the rituals he observes on the lifeboat, they all help him maintain his sanity and remain alive. I believe also the storms, the hunger that he goes through, he still overcomes them. Physical endurance, malnutrition, injuries, he still has the ability to endure the pain. Being mentally sane despite the difficult times that he went through, despite being alone because he has no communication, he's with Richard Parker. Those are the things that can come in there to show his survival instincts. His childhood was the biggest survival manual that he needed. The time he was trained at the zoo, the males that groomed him in his religion, those are the things that really carried him through. Solving the mathematical equation, so those are the things that we bring in. When we're coming in now to question 9, Life of Pi context, this was from chapter 40. Richard Parker did not jump into the water after me. The oar I intended to use as a club floated. I held onto it as I reached for the lifebuoy, now vacant on its previous occupant. It was terrifying to be in the water. It was black and cold and in a rage. I felt as if I were at the bottom of a crumbling well. Water kept crashing down on me. It stung my eyes. It pulled me down. I could hardly breathe. If there hadn't been the lifebuoy, I wouldn't have lasted a minute. I saw a triangle slicing the water 15 feet away. It was a shark's fin. An awful tingle, cold and liquid, went up and down my spine. I swam as fast as I could to one end of the lifeboat, the end still covered by the tarpaulin. I pushed myself up on the lifebuoy with my arms. I couldn't see Richard Parker. He wasn't on the tarpaulin or on a bench. He was at the bottom of the lifeboat. The bright orange tarpaulin was held down by a strong nylon rope that wove its way between metal grommets in the tarpaulin and blunt hooks on the side of the boat. I happened to be treading water at the bow. I was alone and orphaned in the middle of the Pacific, hanging onto an oar, an adult tiger in front of me, sharks beneath me, a storm raging about me. Had I considered my prospects in the light of reason, I surely would have given up and let go of the oar. hoping that I might drown before being eaten. But I don't recall that I had a single thought during those first minutes of relative safety. I didn't even notice daybreak. I held on to the oar. I just held on. God only knows why. That is from chapter 40. Refer to lines 3 to 4. It says, it was terrifying to be in the water, bottom of a crumbling well. Comment on the effectiveness of this image in the context of this extract. Now, when we're coming in, the sea is described as violent. The waves violent, which actually is symbolical of the rage of Pi's current situation. He's at the bottom of a crumbling well, which shows the despair that he is in. Helpless state. There is no way out of the well. There are sharks. There's a storm. There are raging waves or violent waves. And therefore we realize that danger keeps piling up. There is no escape from him. So now we are basing that on what he encounters. I believe I gave more than 3 things there that will sustain you to actually have a picture of what we mean. Refer to lines 1 to 11. Richard Parker did not jump the bottom of the lifeboat. Identify and explain one narrative technique that is used in this paragraph to depict the mood of the extract. One of the things, let's go quickly to those, to that paragraph, line 1 to 11. Richard Parker did not jump into the water after me. Water kept crashing down on me. It stung my eyes. It pulled me down. I could hardly breathe. I swam as fast as I could to the end of the lifeboat. He was at the bottom of the lifeboat. Very short sentences. We have very short sentences. That's the technique I'm seeing first. We have short sentences. Pull me down, stung my eyes, as I said, to the bottom of the sea. I believe that's the agency of his fear. So we have short sentences. That's one. Agency is what they portray. I believe we also have descriptive language. I saw descriptive language as well. When we say descriptive language, I believe we saw awful, terrifying emotions that he felt in a dangerous situation. So those are the 2 that I am seeing at the moment. And then 9.3, refer to line 12, the bright orange tarpaulin. Discuss the significance of the color. Survival, color, the orange is survival. I haven't done this book in a while, but it's coming back. Survival, it's definitely what it is. Hope is what it symbolizes as well. So we are coming in and talking about the orange uten, I believe, the lifeboat, the whistle, they are all orange. The tarpaulin are all orange. Those are the things that he uses for his survival. So he gets into he is able to get onto the lifeboat because of the tarpaulin. The lifeboat is the one that sustains him and Richard Parker to be alive. So those are the things that we are talking about. And then 9.4, refer to lines 16 to 18. Critically comment on the reason and significance of Pi just hanging on to the oar. Shock, fear, and as a result, he continues to hold on, even though he doesn't realize that he's holding on. Instinct. I believe we're talking about instinct here. We are all going back to what we said in the essay. Instinct, shock, but instinct forces him to hold on. I believe we can also talk about he cannot comprehend what has just happened, but what he knows is that he has to save his life at this point on. 9.5 is coming from extra D. Kristen is the quietest of tiger calls, a puff through the nose to express friendliness and harmless intentions. Richard Parker did it again, this time with a rolling of the head. He looked exactly as if he were asking me a question. I looked at him full of fearful wonder. There being no immediate threat, my breath slowed down. My heart stopped knocking about in my chest, and I began to regain my senses. I had to tame him. It was at the moment that I realized this necessity. It was not a question of him or me, but of him and me. We were literally and figuratively in the same boat. We would live or we would die together. He might be killed in an accident or he could die shortly of natural causes, but it would be foolish to count on such an eventuality. More likely the worst would happen, the simple passage of time in which his animal toughness would easily outlast my human frailty. Only if I tamed him could I possibly trick him into dying first, if we were to come to that sorry business. But there's more to it. I will come clean. I will tell you a secret. A part of me was glad about Richard Parker. A part of me did not want Richard Parker to die at all, because if he died, I would be left alone with despair, a foe even more formidable than a tiger. If I still had the will to live, it was thanks to Richard Parker. He kept me from thinking too much about my family and my tragic circumstances. He pushed me to go on living. I hated him for it, yet at the same time, I was grateful. I am grateful. It's the plain truth. Without Richard Parker, I wouldn't be alive today to tell you my story. I looked around at the horizon. Didn't I have here a perfect circus ring, inescapably round, without a single corner for him to hide in? I looked down at the sea. Wasn't this an ideal source of treats with which to condition him to obey? Discuss the significance of pies describing the Proustian sound made by Richard Parker. How does it affect Pie's understanding of the tiger? Okay, he takes it as the opposite of a threat. He is not threatened by it, and therefore he takes it and associates it to friendliness. A connection is created between Pie and Richard Parker, and that's what creates the coexistence, I believe, cohabitation. Therefore, what happens is the way they address each other changes, and therefore they come to an understanding. Somehow there is an understanding between the two. Place the above extract in context. We get it later on, not at the beginning in life of I, but all the same we have it. And therefore, Pie and Richard Parker are the only survivors. The other animals have died. I believe there was a zebra, there was an orang utan, there was a hyena, and as a result, Pie has been contemplating how to kill Richard Parker. But then he realizes he needs Richard Parker for his own survival. So he's planning on keeping him alive. I can't remember the plan number, but I think he has a plan number of some sort to try and having a companion at sea so that they can inhabit the boat together and both survive. 9.7, explain how the explanations about lion taming from previous chapters prepares the reader for Pie's plan to tame Richard Parker. They are alone on the lifeboat, and therefore he establishes himself as I said, he becomes a dominant. I believe the word used in the book is alpha. He becomes the alpha animal, and now he uses what he was used at the circus. Pie will make use of the same methods that he's doing. So he has to train Richard Parker and establish himself as the dominant. The environment is unfamiliar to Richard Parker, which will give Pie an advantage over Richard Parker at that time. 9.8, comment on the irony of the sea as an ideal source of treats. Positivity. He has difficulties and challenges and hardships around him, but the positivity in him is what sustains him. The sea has fish, has turtles, which are the threats, but catching the food was very difficult to do, was unpredictable, and sometimes we'll go for long hours without anything, or days. Refer to line 25 to 20. Based on your knowledge of the novel as a whole, comment on the irony Pie has to tame Richard Parker. I believe somewhere Richard Parker is the only companion that Pi has. So if he does not tame Richard Parker, he will be left alone. So caring for Richard Parker and looking after Richard Parker distracts Pi, and therefore it also sustains him mentally and it distracts him from his current situation. Somewhere later, he uses the coping mechanism of his alter ego while stranded on sea. He has controlled Richard Parker, and therefore that will allow him to sustain himself and fight for survival. So those are the things that could have come in there. We are finally going to our last section, which is the drama Hamlet. Examine the interplay between genuine madness and feigned insanity in Hamlet. That's a play I'm teaching, so I'm able to touch on this one, focusing on how Hamlet's strategic madness contrasts with Ophelia's real psychological breakdown and how these states reflect the broader themes of betrayal and revenge. This was a heavy question. Genuine madness, feigned insanity. There was a thin line between this one. Just as there was a thin line between betrayal and revenge. I believe when we're talking about feigned madness, we're talking about Hamlet's plan to observe the Claudius without being seen and removing the spotlight from himself. It's a strategy, it's a plan that he comes up with, and as such, he wants to investigate. Therefore, the feigned madness will mask his true intentions as he tries and seeks evidence to revenge for his father's murder. But when we come to the contrast of Ophelia, she falls into genuine madness as we see the emotional baggage and the turmoil that she goes through due to the loss of the father, due to feeling betrayed by both Hamlet and her father. So when we come to Hamlet, his feigned madness is planned, it is deliberate, it is intentional. So as such, that is through erratic behavior, nonsensical cliches and puns that he does to confuse those around him because he's intelligent, particularly Claudius, Polonius, I believe, and therefore making them more paranoid. But now that gives him the ideal setting because it allows him to remove the suspicion from himself while he gathers information. He is manipulative during his feigned madness as he operates without anyone knowing his true intentions. I believe when we're coming in, we see though that there's a struggle in Hamlet, internal struggle, one of his soliloquies whereby we show the internal struggle that he goes through, moral implications of revenge, and also the weight of the revenge plot on his shoulders and the decisions that he's making. Ophelia, on the other hand, is a tragic death because she experiences what her emotional state cannot handle, which drives her to suicide. Her madness is through the willow song, and which shows her grief and loss. Ophelia's insanity shows the state of how vulnerable she is and how she cannot cope with expectations from society, that she must cope with betrayal, cope with loss at the same time. Now we see the contrast that is done shows that betrayal and revenge in the plan go together. When we talk about revenge, we are talking about led by betrayal. Hamlet is feeling betrayed through the unnatural death of the father, and therefore that's where now it affects his decision making and causes procrastination. Revenge is to kill Claudius, and he fails to do that because he still puts excuses across, sending him to heaven as he finds him praying, because he is failing to cope with grief and the expectations of the role of murdering a person. So those are some of the things that could have come in. The context questions have been deemed as challenging today. So let's see what was expected of us. Place this extract in context started the play. This is from Act 3, Scene 2. That's the last. What is this one? We say, this is immediately after the mousetrap. And therefore, Rosencrantz, Guildenstern inform Hamlet that the king is upset and Gertrude desires to speak with him. That's where Hamlet now in his own soliloquy expresses his anger towards his mother. And then it says, refer to lines 8 to 9, O heart, lose not thy nature. Let not if ever the soil of Nero enter this firm bosom. Nero was one of the most notorious emperors of ancient Rome who had his mother put to death. Account for Hamlet's plea in O heart, lose not thy nature. One of the things is the violence that Nero committed in murdering his own mother because she poisoned her husband. Hamlet disciplines himself and admonishes himself to be aware of his natural feelings as a son and not allow himself to be like Nero or be in a situation like Nero. He must not perform an unnatural deed or harm the mother or hurt the mother. Elaborate the irony evident in these lines. Hamlet foreshadows and sees that Gertrude will be rebuked. Ironically, he tells himself he will not act, but to confine himself only to words. I will only speak daggers to her, he says, but uses none. But during the play, he scolds himself because he cannot translate his own words into actions. So the irony is in what he says and what he does, because he does not do as he has instructed himself to do in his own soliloquies and words. Refer to lines 11. Refer to lines 3 to 14. If you are the director of the production of Hamlet, how would you instruct the actor to deliver these lines? Reference to both body language and tone. It's a full 4 marks this time. We've been getting 3 marks before. They went further to a 4 marks, which means you have to be fully clear on what you mean. Anger in Hamlet had to be given. He may be moving in a quick pace around the stage, drawing his hands together or his sword as if to murder Claudius, trying to calm himself down by pacing back and forth and trying to contain himself not to act like Nero. He may touch his sword and put it back in his pocket to signify that he will not use it. So any of those had to be gone through. Try and use a soft voice on himself to try and calm himself down. So any of those could have been acceptable. The extract F was long. Learners complained that extract E was short and extract F was very long. They found it challenging. I understand with the narrows now. Place this extract in context came twice in the play, which was why maybe the learners are crying. We are saying Claudius and Laertes have conspired that they will use the friendly jewel as a cover for Laertes to get his revenge. The sword will be made sharper and then it will be tainted with poison. and then there will be a goblet with a cup with poison in it, which will be the backup plan. So now I think also we have the purpose of the jewel was to make the jewel look like an accident. So Hamlet's death would look like an accident during the duel. Now Hamlet and Laertes are both wounded, and that's where we come in now into this extract. And then it says, refer to lines 4 to 5. Oh, villainy, ho, let the door be locked. Treachery, seek it out. Comment on the significance of Hamlet's words in these lines. He viewed himself as a victim, as when he came back for the funeral of the father, he viewed himself as a victim. But now, procrastination and overthinking became his downfall. He is no longer passive and only contemplative. He acts decisively in this scene. So now we realize the impact is that we now have an active Hamlet and not a passive Hamlet. Explain what prompts Laertes' response. I believe Laertes' response is because Hamlet has wounded Claudius with a poisoned sword, and then he has forced him to drink the last of the poison in the cup. Laertes comments that Claudius is justly served because Claudius was the mastermind behind the plan of the backup cup being used for Hamlet, but it led to Gertrude's death. So Claudius now has the time to confess and admit his guilt that Gertrude dies because of the poison prepared by him. But he only chooses to say she has only fainted so that he can cover up his own scheming actions and evil actions that he has done. And then it says, I am more antique Roman than a Dane. Discuss how Horatius' diction conveys his sentiments towards Hamlet. I think throughout the 6 months we've been doing this, I've been talking about the loyalty and love that Horatio has for Hamlet. So I believe Horatio demonstrates his loyalty to Hamlet, and therefore he wishes to commit suicide so that he can die alongside the men that he has been faithful to and loyal to. I believe the custom was when a soldier committed suicide, he would fall on the sword if his leader had just died in duty. So that's exactly what he wants to do. That's loyalty, that's love, and that's friendliness. Refer to lines 38 to 45. As thou art a man to tell my story. Critically discuss how Hamlet's response signifies a shift in his character. He always procrastinated in taking the revenge on Claudius, and that almost gave an inclination that he feared death. I believe also the contemplation in his soliloquies, to be or not to be, which means he has these doubts. But now he has made peace with dying and regards it as peace. Heaven, as he reveals the word in his speech, it provides us with a new understanding that he has handed over any control of his actions to his destiny. So Hamlet his story must be told by Horatio, and therefore Horatio must reveal all the hidden affairs and the truth must be maintained. Hamlet is going to be portrayed as a tragic hero. We are going to question 12, which is Othello. That is our second last question in the exam paper. The failure to be honest and morally good leads to destruction in the drama Othello. Critically evaluate the statements with close reference to the events in the play. Characters failure to be honest, morally good, distraction in the drama. So those are the things that we are going to be touching on. We are looking at tragic heroes when it comes to the plays. The pride in Othello that he has about his honor is what leads to his downfall. When his love for Desdemona is tested by being manipulated by Iago, he chooses to believe Iago's lies. That crumbles his integrity and he becomes questionable as a character. As a result, he appoints himself as Desdemona's god, judges her, and he decides on her destiny. He's very insecure. He makes questionable choices, and he justifies his killing of Desdemona as the action of an honorable murderer, and he will be making the world a better place. That's where we question him and his morals there, because his ego and his pride becomes the problem. He allows himself to be persuaded and blackmailed and manipulated by Iago to kill Cassio. And Cassio gives in to peer pressure, even though he knows he's in charge of the watch that night. But the consequences of his choice becomes the reason why he loses his position as the right-hand man to Othello. Trust and friendship is lost between him and the man he admires and leads after. I believe Emilia makes a very bad moral decision by choosing to keep the handkerchief that Desdemona accidentally loses. Even when she is aware of how devastated Desdemona is by losing Othello's first ever gift to her, she says nothing. The choice makes her an accomplice to Desdemona's death, but when she does reveal her actions, it's too late. The character of being passive in Desdemona, accepting Othello's abusive treatment, is also considered as questionable, and she doesn't challenge Othello, so her fate is sealed already. I believe also abusive behavior towards Desdemona, vulgar language that he uses, cannot be acceptable of a person of high stature. His pride will not allow him to be removed from a high status. He feels he needs to punish those who have tarnished his reputation. His failure to listen to Desdemona is a serious tragic flaw, and it does have fatal to discredit Cassio. As a result, Cassio is demoted from being the lieutenant to Othello, and therefore Iago advises him to plead with Othello, advises Iago to ask Desdemona to plead with Othello on his behalf. And then 13.2 says, you advise me well. This advice is free, I give, and honest. Explain the detail behind the irony of Iago's advice. Cassio thanks Iago for his good advice, but the advice is meant to destroy him. The advice is not going to help Cassio, so his intention is to seal Cassio's downfall. Cassio is going to be implicated of having an affair with Desdemona to Othello, and therefore that will lead to his downfall. In your opinion, is Iago's assessment of Desdemona's character in these lines accurate? Lines 13 to 20, what does she say? The inclining Desdemona to subdue in any honest suit, she's framed as fruitful as the free elements, and then for her to win the more, were to renounce his baptism. And then the question said, in your opinion, is Iago's assessment of Desdemona's character in these lines accurate. She is innocent. She is pure. Her intentions are only to help Cassio because of their friendship. But Othello is under the Othello is the weakness to Othello's reasoning. She's very naive, caring towards Cassio's a problem, and therefore that's how Iago exploits her weakness. She cares too much, and therefore that's the reason why Iago manipulates her weakness. Refer to lines 22 to 25. Suggest how the paradox. It says, when the devil, divinity of hell, when devils will their blackest sins put on, they do suggest at first with heaven shows, as I do now. For while this one is full, lies Desdemona to repair fortunes. And she for him pleads strongly to the more. Okay. All right. It says, suggest how the paradox depicted in these lines underpins or supports the true nature of Iago's character. Iago pretends to be uncertain so that he can play the innocence card. His words suggest that something is happening, suspiciousness is there, but it is part of his plan to manipulate Othello. So he realizes that telling Othello not to pursue the matter anymore will actually push Othello to do it. He does not have the proof that Othello needs or wants. So that's where we are. And then extract H was coming from Iago, re-enter Desdemona and Emilia was Act 3, Scene 3, starting with Othello. Iago, why did I marry this honest creature doubtless sees and no more, much more than he unfolds. Okay. And then the 13.5 says, my lord, account for Iago's manipulative manner towards Othello here. Forcing Iago to keep quiet, Othello to take what he says at face value will actually trigger Othello to take action. That's definitely what he does there. In your opinion, what does Othello's assessment of Iago reveal about Othello himself? Substantiate your response. He comes as too trusting of Iago. He trusts Iago too much. He is a poor judge of character. He accepts Iago's behavior at face value, but ironically demands evidence from Iago about Desdemona's infidelity. He praises Iago for his honesty. Ironically, Iago is the one lying to him. He believes himself, Othello believes himself to be good and a constant character. He lacks insight into the true human nature, as he is only a soldier and a leader in battle. Othello verbalizes his shortcomings and inadequacy as a husband to Desdemona. Explain to what extent you agree with the statement. He is an outsider and sees himself as an outsider. No understanding of the culture. He is a Moor. So that's something that he is always using to show his inadequacy. He is also having so many insecurities, which makes it difficult for him to trust and be loyal, and therefore that's what causes his love to fail. Refer to lines 36 to 38. When do we quicken and look where she comes? If she befalls, or then heaven mocks itself, I'll not believe it. If we're the director of the production of Othello, how would you instruct the actor to deliver these lines? Pay specific attention to body language and tone. Motivate your instructions. His tone will be hesitant, doubtful. He will be pacing up and down on stage. Clasping his hands together to show nervousness, shaking his head over and over again, hands outstretched towards the heavens in a prayer mode, as a plea, and those are the things that can come in on that one. We're going to the last mile, which is the crucible. The lack of integrity and honesty has disastrous consequences. Critically discuss the extent to which you agree to the above statement. When we talk of lack of integrity, we have so many characters that lack integrity, and that's what leads to the tragic deaths of numerous innocent people. Paris, he clearly lacks the qualities of being a minister. He is a villain, but his instincts make him obvious from the beginning that he lacks the qualities of preserving the ministerial duties. He is more worried about how Abigail's actions and being caught will have an impact on him, and he's not worried about the girls. He's dishonest, I believe. A minister at that. My apologies. After he tells Abigail that he saw someone naked, he denies it in court later on. Being a minister at that, he's trying to discredit other men. Proctor, he tries so much to discredit Proctor, Giles, so that he can protect his position. He is very materialistic. He wants so many things. Deeds to the house, cathedrals, and therefore he's not focusing on the spiritual element. Unfortunately, he has a big role in the tragic actions that happen later, because in trying to preserve his own name, he does it at the expense of the others. John is one of them. Girls, they died tragic deaths because of his actions. When we come to the Putnams, we are going to really also put them in as they lack integrity and honesty. Anne's behavior is against the court of the Puritans. She also blames Rebecca and has pure vengeance and hatred for the deaths of her babies. Rebecca is actually hanged because of her dishonesty. That's why we will question her integrity. Thomas is very greedy. He is thinking of his position as a Putnam should afford him more status. He has an attitude of being entitled. He does not belong in a Puritan community at all. He actually makes up stories of witchcraft and even coaches his daughter to call out names of innocent people so that he can benefit from their land. Lying in court when questioned about Giles' claim, Giles dies ultimately because of how Thomas is dishonest. Abigail is not only had an affair with a married man, but she is also introduced as a liar to us. She's very vindictive, and she has no control, self-control, and no boundaries. She threatens the girls. She sticks a needle in her own stomach to pin a voodoo charge on Elizabeth. She has lack of integrity because she easily accuses innocent people of witchcraft just to avoid a beating or a whipping. She lies in court blatantly and makes up stories of yellow birds, cold winds as evidence in the court. She steals Paris's savings and absconds, leaving tragedy behind her. But we also are going to blame the judges, Danforth and Haythorne, who are signs of lacking integrity. They claim to represent the highest court in the land, yet it soon becomes very clear that they are not fighting to root out any evil, but they are going to preserve their own positions of power and authority. And it's at any cost, even if it's people's lives. Because they force very good people to lie just to avoid hanging. They blatantly refuse to listen to testimonies of respected people. They refuse to arrest anyone who goes, and what do? They arrest anyone who goes against the court. Danforth also threatens to hang 10,000 people if they come against him in the court. They are very arrogant, and it's enough now to show us that the court hearings were done without any integrity. Okay, let's go to the context, which is the last question in this question paper. Proctor Elizabeth, it's from Act 2, lays this extract in context. It's been revealed that John Proctor has had an affair with Abigail and has been fired because of the story that she has come up with in court, that the girls are being bewitched. Elizabeth wants John actually to go to Salem and tell the court what Abigail said to them when they were alone, that their witchcraft claims were just for fun. That's where we come into this one. What does Proctor mean by this comment? I have good reason to think before I charge fraud on Abigail. He knows the extent of Abigail's brutality and vindictiveness. So he is concerned that if he charges her, she will expose his adultery and his reputation will be destroyed. So he is trying to save himself. Line 7 to 8, spare me, you forget nothing and forgive nothing. Learn charity, woman. If you're the director of a production of the Crucible, how would you instruct the actor to deliver these lines? Very sarcastic tone when he says, learn charity, woman. I believe it could be a sarcastic tone. It could be a tone of frustration. Throw up his hands or raise his hands into the air, or turn his back on her, so that he shows his frustration of being always reminded of his sin, and is trying to cast off his own guilt. Refer to lines, what is this one? Refer to lines 20 to 21. I never thought you but a good man, John, with a smile, only somewhat bewildered. Is this a valid assessment of John Proctor's character? Refer to the play as a whole to validate your answer. John Proctor is a good man, but because of his affair with Abigail, he still has to prove his integrity and trust by standing for the truth. He does not accept the judge's offer to save his wife because he knows there is more that is at stake. He signs the confession in fear at the beginning, but he tears it up and dies as a man of integrity. So he was blinded by Abigail's beauty, but that does not deter him from dying as a good man. But then we can also, on the other hand, call him, he's not really a good man because he has an affair. He lies about it in a crowd. He is more worried about his reputation than actually admitting to sin. He wants to redeem himself, but he does not want, what is this one? But he rips up the confession in return. Refer to lines 25 to 26. How do you go to Salem when I forbid it? Do you mock me? Using these lines as a starting point, critically discuss the role of the girls in the Salem court. The girls are given powers by the court. They are made important by the court. And therefore, this now allows them to not listen to the leaders in their own homes. The girls' behavior started off as a sport of some sort, but their testimonies become acts of saving themselves, and they cannot now turn back their lies. So which means that they point the finger of revenge wherever they see fit and to whoever they feel they need to get revenge on. So at the end of the day, it's a sport that turns into a messy tragedy because of their lies and failing to get out of their lies. Refer to line 2. Line 2 says, turns his face to the wall. Explain what the stage direction reveals about Rebecca Ness. She is a moral compass. That's what she's always been called. So John is even embarrassed to face Rebecca because she is a true Christian, and John does not want Rebecca Ness to see his deception. So which means she will not pick it up if he does not face her. Comment critically on the irony of Danforth's words. Courage, men, courage. Let a witness your good example that she may come to God herself. When coming in, we are saying the real courage is that Rebecca is able to stand by her word and does not back down on what she has said. She does not give a false testimony to save herself. But Danforth, who is the symbol of justice, is actually not seeing the truth that is in front of him. So what we realize is that she is coerced into giving in, but she does not back down. She stands on a true morality and Christian values. In line 8, now woman, how is this behavior typical of the men in power? We are talking about dismissive of females. Those are the things we'll talk about. Women are treated disrespectfully and are not taken into consideration, and as a result, misogynistic community is what we're talking about, whereby they are only referred to as a woman or women instead of their names. So they do not even address them by their name. So that's dismissive. There's the arrogance there in the males to actually make women feel so inferior. Refer to lines 20 to 23. It is excellency. It is enough. He confessed himself. Let him sign it. Let him sign it. It is a great service, sir. It is a weighty name. It will strike the village that Proctor confessed. I beg you, let him sign it. Hale and Paris both want Proctor's confession. Use these lines as a starting point to contrast their motivations. Hale feels responsible for the deaths, and he denounced the proceedings. He hopes he will gain forgiveness from God because of lying, as he feels that life is more precious than male pride. But Paris, on the other hand, he has his own position that he wants to defend and uphold. And unfortunately, it gets out that the girls have been lying, and he will be thrown out of asylum. But if people see John confess, it will give credibility to him and the court's actions. So which means that he does not want to be responsible.